I'm going to be talking about service workers. And you can't talk about service workers without talking about PWAs, progressive web apps. So we're going to get into that too. But first, a little introduction. I'm Adam Trimble. I am a senior software engineer at Goat. I previously worked at Intel and I worked at the advertising agency Razorfish. I have pretty standard hobbies. I like coffee. I make pasta from scratch at home. I love art and rock climbing and any number of different things, but especially love coding. As David mentioned, Mr. Nanash, go get the whiskey. So as David mentioned, yeah, it's a weird time, but we are incredibly lucky, and we need to understand that as software engineers, as people that work in the digital fields, we have a leg up, and we're incredibly privileged to be in the place that we are. I know that some of you may not be feeling that, and you may have lost some income, or you may be facing, other circumstances. If you are not, if you have retained your position and you have that privilege, please consider donating. If you like my talk at all, I have two charities that I'm really fond of. One is that the Restaurant Workers Community Foundation has a COVID-19 emergency relief fund. Many of my friends and family work in the restaurant industry. So you can go to bit.ly/COVID help restaurants, and you can donate there. You can also donate to Feeding America, which is the nation's largest domestic hunger relief organization. They are working right now to give money not only to their food pantries, but to food pantries that are just being set up to help with COVID-19. Both reputable and cool organizations. So yeah, if you feel inclined, if you get anything out of this talk, please do. So now that's over the way. Let's talk about, like I said, you can't talk about service workers without talking about progressive web apps. And yeah, let's get a little context. Let's back it up. I love getting context about stuff. So I have this timeline from 2005 to 2020, and really the first event was iPhone 1. When Jobs debuted the iPhone 1, it was his vision that web apps would be the primary mechanism that the iPhone, was developed on. He felt strongly that there didn't need to be third-party apps, there didn't need to be, other mechanisms that the web could handle it. And that lasted for about a year until the App Store debuted in 2008, a year later. So the technology just wasn't there. If we think of a web app as something that could totally supplant, a native app, that it didn't have offline support. Web apps didn't have, or web pages in general didn't have an understanding of like responsive design as much back then, and a many number of things, push notifications, etc. So web apps kind of languished for a while until about 2015, when there was a designer, Francis Behrman, and an engineer, Alex Russell, at Google, who coined the term progressive web app. And they coined it sort of as this marketing umbrella term because there's a lot of technologies that Chrome was coming up with that they wanted other browsers to pick up. And that's kind of how they came up with PWA. And browsers were kind of slow to pick it up. Safari picked it up 2 years later. So Safari got service workers in 2017, and Edge really only got service workers in 2019. So it wasn't until last year that desktop and mobile browsers, all of them, really got the technologies that we're talking about. So this is kind of when we talk about PWA, some of us might think they've been around for a while, but yeah, no, they are kind of new. So, and I mentioned PWA is sort of like a marketing term. I want to hit that as well. So it's similar to HTML5 in my estimation. HTML5 was not one specific thing. It was a grouping of technologies. You had web storage, you had Canvas, you had, audio and video and all of these other things kind of grouped in this umbrella that was a, marketing label that people could use. Like if you had a client that said, I want HTML5, you basically knew they wanted something that was new, but it wasn't necessarily clear what that meant. So yeah, PWAs are similar, right? We have, that we have apps that are secure with HTTPS. We have like app icons on your phone when you install them. You can get notifications and all that. But really, we're talking about service workers here. So that's what we're going to dive into. So as I said, I work at Goat, and at Goat, yeah, we have like an initiative called Pwas. Shout out to Hi. He's put us on this initiative, which is great. So we're looking at performance automation, PWAs, A/B testing, and server-side rendering, and it's been a cool effort. It's ongoing, and we are yeah, looking into that. So I was kind of looking into our service worker support, and it's really interesting. What we got out of it is it did have a lot of the benefits of, yeah, of the PWAs. That, it improves perceived performance. It improves actual performance. It's really great for our SEO. But the issue is there's just so many got yous. Uh, Service workers are complicated. They're capturing requests as they come in and out of the browser, and that's a lot of responsibility. And if you mess that up in an app that's at scale, there are real revenue implications for that. So you can't just like put a service worker into your app and then just feel like that's enough. And so many of the tutorials online are really only kind of saying like, here's what you need to get a PWA. They're trying to, I guess, give you that lighthouse thumbs up, like you did it, you got your PWA. But what happens after that? What kind of considerations do you need to do after you've gotten a thumbs up from Lighthouse? And what kind of dangers are you going to be in? Well, there are a lot of pitfalls. I'm going to bring it back to when I played Atari in my cousin's living room. But yeah, there were quite a few of them, and I want to help you guys. I want you to learn from our mistakes. So, one of the big ones is life cycles. So, a service worker, the first time it loads, it goes through a life cycle. You register it, it gets activated, it gets installed, and then you can uninstall it later. They're really sticky too because you want offline support. So they live like deep in the browser, and uh, old versions of your service worker can kind of stick around. And it's really, you need to be aware that when you have that typical boilerplate register a new service worker, this little snippet of code is going to help you out, because you need to look at what other service workers in the domain that you have access to are there and clear them out. And what that's sort of the nitty gritty kind of code level of it. The higher picture kind of architecture level of it is that you need to think of a service worker as a deployable thing. It is a service, it's the deployed service. So as you're getting into CI, CD, etc., like think of how it does like exist within that thought process as separate than your sort of main app, because they, in a lot of ways, they sort of work in tandem and aren't completely like sewn together. So another big thing is cache limits. So caching is obviously one of the best things that service workers can provide you. That's the offline support that we're all looking for. You can cache pages, you can cache assets, you can cache all sorts of stuff. And we were really enthralled with how fast things were going. And one of the things we started to look at was caching images and assets. And when we cached assets for offline support, those pages would pop. I mean, you would go to some product, and we sell shoes, right? Goat plugging here, is an online ship to verify marketplace where people have sometimes high value sneakers that they want to know if they're real or not. They ship them to us, we authenticate them, and then we sell them on. We and Images are a huge part of that. People are going to buy a product based on the images that they have. So images are really important to us. As we went through these different pages, we were caching these offline, and then they would just like boom, boom. The problem is that every single browser has a different cache size limit. And it's based on an algorithm that means that it's different per every person. And yes, every browser has a different algorithm of how they get there, but most of them are based on the storage that that person's machine has. So if you only have 100 meg left on your machine, you might only have like a meg for your cache limit. If you have a new machine, there's like gigs, you're going to have a lot of space. And the error that comes out, this sort of maximum cache size error, is a real JS error, and it will bring your app down. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it, but you will get the white page of death, the white JavaScript error problem. Thinking about it, it makes me nervous. So one good solution for this is Google has a service worker library called Workbox. Workbox has a purge on quota error. We use Workbox because it's sometimes easier than dealing with the native service worker APIs. But yeah, that is key, that purge on quota error item. And then another thing that's really interesting when we talk about cache size limits is opaque responses. And an opaque response is where you have the domain that your service worker lives in, and it's making a request to a third party asset. So say you have a CDN where your images are at, they're in a different domain, and it reaches out. If that request is not in the domain that your service worker is registered to, and it does not utilize cores and get the correct cores or cross origin request headers, it's going to be categorized as an opaque response. And every opaque response starts at 7 meg. They buffer the item because they don't, it's a security concern when loading things from third parties. So even if you have like 200K images and you have like 20 of them on a page, you're gonna have 140 meg cache if you're caching opaque responses. So be super careful about that. And it's definitely a gotcha to watch out for. Another one is cache invalidation. So you may be having a bunch of different caches that you're putting things to. You have some API responses, you have some pages that you're putting in there, and then as you're maybe promoting a new service worker, you say, I don't need this cache. I want to do something else. Well, if you don't get rid of them, or if you don't invalidate the cache, you can end up like having those just hang around forever. There's that old joke, right? That there's two hard problems in software engineering: naming things, cache invalidation, and off by one errors. And it's true, cache invalidation is like a huge problem here. And be careful about what you choose to put in there, how long you choose to put it in the cache, how many entries you want to put into each one. Um, I found that being conservative with what you want to put in there is the best approach. Really start from the shell of your app so that the shell loads, so that your base level JavaScript that you need to display the pages loads, and then let the normal browser cache handle some other things. Like if you have images that are coming in, those are going to get cached. They're not offline, but be really careful about what you put in there. Another thing is push notifications. So yeah, we can get push notifications now. I kind of have started seeing them like everywhere. Every page wants me to turn on notifications and all that. And because you start seeing that a lot, well, there is a danger here when you're coding that, in that if you directly ask a user through the browser APIs if you can notify them and they say no, you can never ask them again. So what you need to build is a soft prompt. So you need to build a UI that you can show, that you can kind of prime them that the browser is going to ask them for something. And in this way, they know whether or not. If they click no, they don't want to do it, your UI goes away. You can ask them again later. But yeah, if you don't do that, you're going to kind of be locked out. years later, if you have a better approach to notifications, you won't be able to do it for them. And then user targeting, like, how do you push the right notification to the right person? Do you just want to do it for everyone? Probably not. You want to be smart about that. And that's a really difficult thing to do. I'm going to plug our solution. We use a company called Braze. They're really great, super easy to install, and they handle a lot of that for us. So another thing, background sync. This one is interesting because I think the concerns here are less technical and really more of a like UX concern because you need to be really careful with background syncing critical requests. Uh, A, it will double the error space in the sense that if something goes wrong and then you're offline and then you're offline, they make a request and then you come back up and then there's an error with your request then the user maybe wasn't even expecting that that request would resume. They're not used to that. And then if there's an error there, they're getting some unknown, unforced error, which can be really jarring for the user. So you just need to work with your design team and your backend team to really figure out if this is if this is something that you want to invest your time in. It's kind of finicky to get working, and if you I don't know, I would just say be very careful with this background sync. Talk to your team members before you start putting anything in, and really prioritize the real world experience of your users and what they expect, to see if there's ROI on this particular part of a service worker. And then yeah, other things we ran into. We ran into basic auth issues. So the basic auth, like our staging environments, they pop a basic auth that we can type in. Um, and if your page was cached by our service worker, sometimes that wouldn't work at all, because it needs to actually hit the server for that basic auth to be popped. And when you pulled that request, it doesn't actually do it. So we had to get a workaround for that. And then yeah, I think just making sure that people understand the advantages of a service worker and why you might want to do that because your development environment will change. If you have a group of 10, 15 people that are all working on the same thing and then they're not used to it, you might want to alert them like, hey, here's how you can turn service workers off while you're developing. Here's how you can look into the cache and see what's being cached. And then most importantly, here are the advantages. And yeah, so I've talked about a lot of gotchas, but we found like one super great benefit of our approach was that we ended up being able to take things out of Redux that really didn't need to be there. So we're doing kind of a little bit of caching of our API responses. Not all of them, like say pricing for a product, like pricing might change anytime, and the user always wants to get the correct pricing. So we never do that. But things like, certain pages, certain info about a shoe, or yeah, you can see that here in our products. Like this is one of our Redux maps. And we were keeping kind of the slug of different shoes. So we got some Yeezys, we got some Air Max or some Jordans. And then as you went in, we would check Redux and see, is that product in there? If it is, pull it out of Redux. We don't have to make a request. Otherwise, make a request and put it into the slug map. Well, yeah, so that's like a lot of overhead, right? You're going to need the reducers to handle that. You're going to need the dispatchers. You're going to need actions like, yeah, and people have to understand that you might have like a cached response. With service workers, what we found was you could just make the request. Your component just says like, give me this, ping our backend, and then the service worker can say, is this an API response that I should cache? And it's automatically going to cache it via the URL. So all of this work, all the reducers, all the actions, everything that we had to do in Redux in order to kind of cache these things became totally clear. And now, when you have like a junior dev or somebody that's new to the project and they want to, make a request or just say like, oh yeah, this page just gets this. They don't even necessarily need to know that there's a cache layer that's handling that, but they, eventually can take advantage of it as well. So that was really cool. I really enjoyed like that particular aspect of it. And yeah, that's some of the pitfalls of and like some of the benefits of service workers. I really just wanted to go in depth and give you guys a little bit of picture about what we ran into, real world issues we had, and things that you can watch out for. I still believe that service workers are really great part or technology that you can use. I just think that it's not as simple as getting a lighthouse thumbs up. So yeah, if you got anything out of this, I'm going to plug these charities again. I think that we're all in a lucky place to be here. Thank you for joining me. Appreciate that, and thank you everyone. Yeah, that's my Twitter. I just rejoined Twitter, so I don't really have anything on there. But yeah, you can follow me. I'll have stuff eventually. Yeah, Peter's still a goat. Yeah. And yay for less Redux. Thanks for all the comments, guys. I appreciate this. And yeah, get in there, use a service worker, and use it carefully.